Remember when kids rode in the back of pickup trucks on summer evenings? When ashtrays sat on every restaurant table, and seatbelts were more suggestion than law? The Canada of the 1960s moved to a different rhythm, one where everyday habits we take for granted today would earn you a fine, a court date, or worse. What felt normal then can seem almost reckless now. From the corner store to the highway, from the doctor's office to your own backyard, the 60s were governed by rules we've since rewritten entirely. So what were Canadians doing every single day that would be illegal now? Let's step back into that world and find out what changed and why. The Canada of the 1960s was built on post-war confidence. 18 million Canadians were building something new, suburbs sprawling outward, factories humming with 3 shifts, and new schools opening every few months to keep up with the baby boom. It was a country in motion. Families were bigger then, 4 or 5 kids not uncommon, and nearly every household had a television set by decade's end. Cars were sleek and chrome-heavy, symbols of prosperity and freedom. But more than anything, it was a world built on trust. Trust in institutions, trust in authority, trust that people would look out for each other. Government regulation was lighter, safety standards were looser. Personal responsibility meant exactly that, personal. Many of the things people did every day weren't seen as dangerous, they were just normal, just life, the way things had always been done. But beneath the optimism, change was coming. Science was asking harder questions. Doctors were seeing patterns. Activists were demanding answers. And slowly the rules Canadians lived by were about to be rewritten. One of those rules surrounded something visible in every public space, the ever-present cloud of cigarette smoke. Number 1, smoking anywhere and everywhere. Picture the blue haze hanging in the air of every restaurant you walk into. The soft click of a lighter, the scratch of a match, the ribbon of smoke curling upward from ashtrays on every table, every desk, every counter. You could smoke on an airplane 30,000 feet up. You could smoke in the hospital waiting room while your wife gave birth down the hall. Office workers kept cigarettes going all day at their desks. Teachers smoked in the staff room. Movie theaters had ashtrays built into the seats. Roughly half of all Canadian adults smoked in the mid-1960s. Cigarettes were advertised with doctors in white coats, with elegant women at dinner parties. Smoking wasn't just accepted, it was encouraged. Then the research started coming in. Studies linking smoking to lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. Regulations began to appear, first on airplanes, then in government buildings, then restaurants, workplaces, and hospitals. By the time the Smoking and Vaping Act came into full effect, smoking in virtually all enclosed public spaces had become illegal. What was once everywhere became nowhere. But smoke wasn't just in the hands of adults. It was in the hands of the very youngest among us, purchased without a second thought. Number 2, children buying cigarettes. A 10-year-old walks into the corner store with a quarter. The clerk nods. The kid says, "A pack of Export A for my dad." The clerk slides it across. No questions asked. This was routine. Children were sent to buy cigarettes the same way they were sent for milk or bread. And no one saw anything wrong with it. There were no age restrictions. A child could walk into any store in Canada and buy tobacco. Cigarette vending machines made it even easier. They stood in restaurant lobbies, bowling alleys, and bus stations. Anyone with the right change could buy a pack. Ontario introduced the first age restriction in 1977. Other provinces followed through the 80s and 90s. The Federal Tobacco Act arrived in 1997. Now it's illegal everywhere in Canada to sell tobacco to anyone under 18. Clerks ask for ID. The casual attitude toward risk extended far beyond the corner store. It followed Canadians onto the highway, where another dangerous habit was barely policed at all. Number 3, drinking and driving. Friday night at the Legion. Men finish their drinks, grab their keys and head to the parking lot. A few beers and then the drive home was just part of the evening. Technically, impaired driving was illegal in 1960s Canada, but enforcement was minimal. Police didn't set up roadblocks. If you weren't weaving all over the road, chances were good you'd make it home without seeing an officer. The breathalyzer was introduced in 1969, but testing was rare. There were no random spot checks, no ride programs. For most of the 60s, you could drink and drive with very little fear of consequence. Traffic fatalities peaked in the early 1970s. Thousands of deaths every year, many alcohol-related. Slowly the laws began to tighten. Stricter penalties, mandatory testing, public awareness campaigns. Now the criminal code includes serious provisions for impaired driving, immediate license suspensions, heavy fines, jail time for repeat offenders. The cultural shift has been total. Drinking and driving carries a stigma now. It's not just illegal, it's socially unacceptable. The roads were dangerous in other ways too, especially for the smallest passengers. Riding completely unprotected. Number 4. No car seats or seatbelts. The family car pulls out on a Sunday afternoon. 3 kids in the back seat, standing. The baby is on mum's lap in the front, face pressed to the windshield. No restraints, no belts, just open space and the hum of the engine. Seatbelts existed but were optional equipment until 1971. Even when cars had them, they were rarely used. Car seats for children didn't exist in any meaningful form. If you had a baby, you held them. If you had toddlers, they sat wherever there was room. The risk was real. In a sudden stop, a child standing in the back would be thrown forward. In a collision, an infant on a lap would become a projectile. Ontario became the first province to require seatbelt use in 1976. Child car seat laws came even later, through the 1980s and 1990s. Child passenger deaths decreased dramatically with the adoption of car seats. Now the regulations are specific. Car seats are mandated by age and weight. Seatbelts for everyone else, no exceptions. The fines are significant, but more than that, it's become unthinkable to drive without securing your children first. But danger wasn't just on the roads. It was waiting inside the home itself, coating the walls in bright, toxic colors. Number 5. Lead paint everywhere. The paint was beautiful. Rich, vibrant colors that covered walls in a single coat, and lasted for years. Lead paint was everywhere in 1960s Canadian homes, prized for its coverage, durability, and longevity. Cribs were painted with it, toys were coated in it, playground equipment, furniture, window frames, and every surface got a layer of lead-based paint. Children gripped painted crib rails with their hands and mouths. They touched painted walls and then put their hands in their mouths the way children do. The danger was invisible. Lead accumulates slowly in the body, in the bones, in the brain. Developmental delays, learning disabilities, lower IQ. The effects were subtle enough that no one connected them to the paint on the walls. The research began to surface in the 1970s. In 1976, Canada began restricting lead in paint. By 2005, lead in surface coatings was essentially banned. Now, renovating an older home requires professional lead testing. If lead paint is present, removal requires specialized procedures. But the legacy remains. Older homes still contain lead paint, buried under newer coatings, a reminder that the things we trusted were slowly poisoning us. And the poison wasn't confined indoors. Outside, another toxic substance was being sprayed freely into the summer air, celebrated as modern progress. Number 6. DDT spraying. Summer evenings had a particular quality. You'd hear the low rumble of the truck coming down the street, the DDT truck, fogging for mosquitoes. A white cloud would roll out behind it, and the kids would run into it, laughing, playing in the mist like it was magical. DDT was everywhere, sprayed on crops, applied to home gardens, used in parks, playgrounds, and roadsides. The marketing promised safety. Children played in the spray. Families picnicked on treated lawns. Farmers handled it without gloves. But DDT doesn't break down. It accumulates. Fewer birds in the spring. Eggshells are too thin to survive. Populations crashing. In 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. The book documented the decline of bird populations, the contamination of water and soil. Canada restricted DDT use in 1969. By 1985, most uses were banned. Now, pesticide regulations in Canada are strict. Products are tested, restricted, and monitored. We understand that chemicals don't just disappear, that what we put into the world comes back to us. Physical harm came in other forms too. Ones that were considered not just acceptable, but necessary for teaching children respect. Number 7. Corporal punishment in schools. The strap hung in the principal's office, leather and worn. In schools across Canada through the 1960s, corporal punishment was legal, sanctioned, and expected. The student sent to the office knew what was coming. Hand extended, palm up. The sound of leather meeting skin echoed down the hallway. Parents often supported it. Respect for authority was paramount, and authority had the right to enforce that respect physically. Teachers weren't seen as overstepping. They were maintaining order. But research into child psychology began to show that physical punishment was not effective, that it created fear rather than respect. The legal landscape shifted province by province through the 1970s and 1990s. In every Canadian school today, corporal punishment is illegal. If a teacher struck a student the way principals routinely did in the 1960s, They would face criminal charges. We understand now that discipline can be taught without pain, that children learn better in environments built on trust rather than fear. Yet of all the legal practices from that era, perhaps the most painful to confront wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It was posted openly, defended publicly, and woven into the very fabric of everyday life. Yet of all the legal practices from that era, perhaps the most painful to confront wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It was posted openly, defended publicly, and woven into the very fabric of everyday life. And number 8, legal discrimination. Perhaps the most difficult thing to confront. Discrimination wasn't hidden. It was explicit, posted, and defended. Signs at beaches, at clubs, at restaurants, Gentiles only, no Jews, no coloureds, restricted. This was legal. Jewish Canadians were turned away from resorts. Black Canadians faced exclusion from employment, housing, and public spaces. Asian Canadians were barred from certain professions. Housing covenants prohibited sale to anyone not of European descent. The Canadian Bill of Rights, passed in 1960, had a limited effect. Real change began with provincial human rights codes. Ontario passed its code in 1962. Other provinces followed through the 60s and 70s. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, entrenched in 1982, changed everything. It guaranteed equality rights, protected against discrimination. The signs came down. The policies were abolished. The laws changed. So let's look at all 8 together. Smoking everywhere. Children buying cigarettes. Drinking and driving. No seatbelts, no car seats. Lead paint. DDT was sprayed freely. Corporal punishment. Legal discrimination. The common thread. They all felt normal. They were woven into everyday life, so deeply embedded that most people never questioned them. And then we learned, through research, through tragedy, through voices that refused to accept the way things were, we learned that smoke hurts more than just the smoker, that children needed protection, that chemicals had consequences, that discipline could be taught without pain. A just society couldn't exclude people based on who they were. The Canada of the 1960s wasn't populated by bad people. They were people of their time, doing what seemed normal, but they were capable of change. They listened to new evidence. They rewrote the rules when the old ones proved harmful. Progress isn't about condemning the past, it's about learning from it. It's about recognizing that what seems normal now might look very different to the people who come after us. So here's the question. What are we doing right now that future generations will look back on with disbelief? History doesn't judge to condemn, it judges to teach. The Canada of the 1960s gave us the Canada of today, through learning, through loss, through laws that changed because people demanded better. The progress is real, the world is safer, more just, more aware, but the work isn't finished. It never is. So I want to hear from you. What do you remember that would be illegal today? What stories did your parents tell you? Leave a comment below. Share this video with someone who lived through those years. And if you want to keep exploring Canadian history, the stories we've forgotten, and the lessons we're still learning, subscribe to the channel. The past is closer than we think, and so is the future we're building right now.